So we used to do the Joey Lawrence of Arabia. You remember that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need to figure out a WoW version of that.
Wow.
Joey, the British are coming. Whoa. I love Joey Lawrence of Arabia. That's for anyone who gets that reference, because it's two very disparate things. But anyone who gets it, it's like, that's a fucking solid joke.
Wow. It's like in my brain now.
Owen Wilson's War. Owen, the Russians have invaded Afghanistan. Wow. That might be it. Welcome to Subject to Blackout. My name is Timo, and with me as always is Mike. Mike, how you been?
Good, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. This past week, we tasked ourselves to watch the 1999 classic Mystery Men. Mike, we watched that movie. What are your thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts.
I'll take one of them.
I have so many thoughts. It's a movie that's so full of potential. First of all, it's underappreciated, but that doesn't mean that it's like a hidden gem. There are issues with it, but it's underappreciated, and like I wish a few things had happened to make it a better movie. But still, it deserves more recognition than it has.
Yeah, I would say that's very much my takeaway from rewatching this film for the first time in at least 15 years. Was, wow, this is really fun. Wow, this really isn't all that good.
Right.
But I'm enjoying it in any way.
Right.
And I mean, let's just get to it. We were texting each other earlier this evening as you were watching it. And this film, if you have not seen Mystery Men, is fucking stacked.
The cast is fantastic. And we're not just talking like main cast. We're like it's a deep bench. It's like a deep fucking bench.
I mean, when you're getting to second or third tier characters, you're talking about Kel from the Keenan and Kel show.
Right.
You're talking about Pee Wee Herman.
In between sex scandals.
In between sex scandals. when he was viable talent just for a brief moment in the late 90s.
Yeah.
You're also then getting to even lower tier characters where you're talking about Tom Waits. You're getting
pre-Jim Jarmusch, so like pre-quirky indie movies. By the way.
And then you're getting like just bit characters like Dane Cook shows up for a hot second as the Waffler.
Right, Dane Cook shows up. The dude we actually were talking about for an unrelated thing, Doug Jones, who was in a bunch of Guillermo del Toro movies, like every single one.
Mm-hmm.
Also in it, and even
I thought you were gonna pull a Hellboy right off the bat.
Well, even some of the cameos. No, I'm gonna work it in later.
Bitch.
I know, I'm gonna work it in later. Even some of the cameos. So there's this whole scene that kind of like mirrors the movie The Warriors, where there's like a bunch of different really flamboyant gangs together. So did you see a couple of the leaders of those gangs? One of them was...
Oh, yes, Michael. Oh, I've seen. First of all, a very obvious call out to the no goody mob in the film, but the goody mob is actually there. So CeeLo Green.
Right.
And his compatriots from the goody mob. But also the leader of the frat boys is none other than two-time Criterion Collection director Michael Bay.
Michael Bay. Yep. Which is
kind of... does he fit that role? I mean, he's a little old, but he fits that role real good.
It was perfect. Yeah, it was perfect. I mean, there were other things that were kind of wild. So Jeffrey Rush, award-winning actor.
I believe Academy Award-winning actor, if I'm correct.
In one of his first like major major films. And Janine Garofalo, as she was rising to become kind of like an awesome indie comic star in the early 2000s, this is like what, a year before Wet Hot American Summer, where she like totally rocked.
Yeah.
Ben Stiller about a year before Zoolander.
Yeah. I mean, this is Ben Stiller right as he's about to start peaking.
Yeah. William H. Macy a year after like Fargo. Can't explain that one, but I guess he just wanted to wind down.
And then the incomparable Hank Azaria, who
Hank
obviously,
Azaria.
who throughout both of our lives has been a constant pop
A voice.
culture
Yep.
voice, thanks to obviously his incredible run on The Simpsons. But I mean, also now he has his own television show. He's done some movies. He's in Birdcage, which is a movie that I personally love. But yeah, even he's in this and just absolutely is bringing his A game to what is a lackluster script.
I mean, don't forget that Hank Azaria was riding high in this movie after having been a supporting actor to Matthew Broderick in the 1998 Godzilla movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. To go from that, which is like everything that was wrong about like the, 1990s, like big blockbuster movie, was just like, we'll take some IP and not care about its original intent at all and just turn it into an action movie. And then to go to this, which is this weird, idiosyncratic, it feels like someone originally meant for it to be like a spoof on like Batman, but instead it just turns into this unique thing that's all of it pretty much its own like world that feels lived in and authentic. It's very bizarre. So
the thing is, it would have been like the movie anticipates the kind of like superhero cynicism,
yeah,
and like trying to confront that, the like kind of superhero industrial complex that was kind of addressed in two movies that I thought of. The first one being Megamind,
okay,
the animated movie with Will Ferrell and Brad Pitt.
yes, I never saw that movie, but
I mean, the whole point of the movie is that like there was kind of this economy of superheroes that they were kind of like eternally at odds with each other. And there was the other one that I'm actually thinking of is Captain America: Civil War, where Tony Stark is addressing that the reason why Earth might always be in peril is because there are people to test their metal against. That there's this other kind of like superhero industrial complex. So this kind of addresses a superhero craze before it had happened. Like, I think one of the things that's a shame
before.
Yeah. And one of the things that's kind of a shame about it is that if it had been made later, it would have been able to directly confront a lot of the tropes that are present now. And I think it would have had an opportunity to be relevant in a way that it couldn't, because it didn't have the types of source material that would have like really lent to this type of story and this type of comedy. So in addition to that, there's a deeper level of context that I think is worth mentioning, because while we're talking about like that it wasn't around for like Marvel movies or anything like that, where this movie was optioned at the same time as a lot of other movies. So it was announced in 1997, and I have this USA Today article from 1997.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to read you a list of the other movies or the other comic books it was selected for development with.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay, so Mystery Men was originally a comic book, selected for development 1997, along with these movies, or along with these other comics: Blade, Superman Lives, X-Men, Fantastic Four, The Hulk, Captain America, Iron Man, Daredevil, Silver Surfer, Hellboy, not the David Harbour one,
You son of a bitch,
Green Hornet, and like a handful of other ones. So at the same time that basically all of these movies that are now our world of superheroes were being selected or optioned for films, Mystery Men was also grabbed. It just happened to be the first in this like giant slew of Superman titles of the past 20 years.
Well, and kind of like you were saying, because it's first, it didn't come off as a critique of superhero movies because there wasn't the large cache of movies that we have now,
Right.
For it to go off of. But it still is a pretty solid critique of what we've seen from, say, the Marvel or DC cinematic universes.
Right.
Universi. Universes.
Octopodes.
But I did, like, a lot of it comes off as an apt critique of the excess that we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't nail it because obviously it can't. Like you said, if it had come out a few years later, it could have dealt with some more obvious tropes and things that it couldn't predict. But like the idea of superhero fatigue is kind of addressed directly in the plot of the film.
Yep.
Heroes ending up actually creating supervillains or allowing supervillains to continue because otherwise they wouldn't have anything to do. That to me is a critique of like Marvel just has to keep getting bigger and badder and worse villains. Otherwise, like, what are they going to do?
Right.
And visually, this reminds me a lot of the Joel Schumacher Batman movies. There's a lot of kind of like Art Deco-y aesthetic to the city.
It's very cartoony.
Very cartoony.
Very kitsch.
But it's also mixes like halfway into Blade Runner, where it does feel kind of
lived in
dystopian, lived in, like multicultural in a way that, like America, which presumably this movie takes place in, doesn't feel like, but Blade Runner's Los Angeles certainly felt. You see that scene in the diner, and that diner is just kind of like gross and run down. And then when you leave the diner, it's a very gross and run down part of the city. And then you get these kind of Joel Schumacher-esque, like vivid landscapes of this Art Deco nightmare. But I thought the visuals kind of skirted those two styles really well in a way that I haven't seen any movie kind of deal with.
I agree. I didn't think about it in terms of cyberpunk, but I absolutely see what you're saying. And I definitely in the set design, I definitely see that like 90s tradition of sci-fi. Like it definitely is reminiscent of like trying to think of some of the movies that because it's not really like a CGI heavy movie, so we're not talking about The Fifth Element, but we are talking about like there's a particular movie I'm trying to think of. We're talking about kind of like Beetlejuice, like that kind of aesthetic. Or
yeah, I can see that.
And it also has the kind of 90s cinematography. There's like a lot of close-up shots. There's like a lot of like kind of close-up, kind of distorted shots, right? Where you're really focused on the character in the foreground, and the background is a little bit distorted, like a little bit blurred out. So there's like a lot of the composition of the film is like very 90s and dated. I mean,
it feels low budget.
It feels low budget, even though it was actually a $68 million film, which is not as much.
You try paying that cast.
Yeah. Remember, Waterworld was like 100.
So, it was 2, I thought.
Was it 2?
I think it was 2.
Waterworld is just sort of, a blank check for Kevin Costner.
It's a world made of water. It's expensive.
Part of the reason why I think the composition and cinematography seems so deeply 90s is because the director was like a commercial director. They were famous for 2 things. Like, this doesn't mean that they couldn't make a rad movie. Like, they could absolutely make a rad B movie.
A lot of directors at that time were coming out of either advertisements or music videos.
Yeah.
Like Michael Bay, which is probably how he's in that movie.
Absolutely. Yeah. Michael Bay is a great example.
David Fincher.
Yeah. The team who did Little Miss Sunshine, who also were like, do you know who we need? Greg Kinnear.
A lot of people needed Greg Kinnear for about a 4-year window, and then nobody needed Greg Kinnear.
Yeah. So they have won awards for two different campaigns that are pretty iconic for the 90s. Got Milk.
Yep.
Do you know the other one?
I do not.
Taco Bell Chihuahua campaigns.
Wow.
Yep.
I knew of the Got Milk because that was Michael Bay. I did not know about the Chihuahua.
Yep. So I mean, you can definitely see that over the top style that would have been present in those commercials too, in the composition of the film itself.
Yeah, if there was a talking Chihuahua in this film, it would feel normal. It would feel like the Waffler. It would feel like one of those characters.
Yeah.
Because this world, obviously, some people have legitimate superpowers. Which, when watching this for the first time in so long, I was like, does anyone actually have superpowers? Because a guy throws silverware, another guy shovels people, and one guy allegedly gets, superhumanly angry.
Yeah.
Even the main hero. Who do you remember Greg Kinnear's name in the movie? Because I do not.
Captain Amazing.
Captain Amazing. They didn't spend a lot of time on that one. But yeah, Captain Amazing doesn't seem to have superpowers necessarily. He's just well sponsored and has, I would presume, gadgets and whatnot. But then all of a sudden there's a bowling ball that can fly through the air, and we learn that Ben Stiller's superhuman rage is real, and Kel can turn invisible. There is a certain level of absurdism in that, which you can kind of see going back to their advertising roots, just going a little bit over the top.
I want to go back to Greg Kinnear a little bit, because there was seriously this moment in the 90s where there were a bunch of just sort of like average looking white guy actors that were just like in a bunch of things. And in the same way that I keep forgetting that like Megan Fox and Kristen Stewart are not the same person, like it took me a while to get to Greg Kinnear. I was like, oh my God, like Bill Paxton? No, wait a minute. Kiefer Sutherland?
No.
Ed Harris?
Oh, come on. Don't do Ed Harris like that.
Greg Kinnear.
Ed Harris is a really good actor. He's done some excellent work in recent years on Westworld.
Ed Harris,
goddamn, he's in Apollo 13. He's in Apollo 13. You respect him, okay?
He always just shows up somewhere. Oh yeah, like I could have picked more white people. Shoot, yeah. Who's Lieutenant Dan again? Lieutenant Dan.
Fuck, what's his fucking name? Gary Sinise. I
Gary
knew it was
Sinise.
something like that.
Yeah, Gary Sinise? Nope, Greg Kinnear. Greg.
Yeah. The Gary Sinise, Greg Kinnear thing is, I see that.
Bill Paxton, too. Could have been Bill Paxton.
Yeah. Yeah, that to a lesser extent. I feel like he was a bigger movie star than either one of those guys ever got to. But you take Ed Harris's name out of your filthy mouth.
Game over, man. Like, because it's not like a Matthew Broderick or a Tom Hanks. It's kind of like, it's not a blonde dude, but it's like blonde dude energy. You know?
Greg Kinnear has leading man presence in like every role that he's ever been in, but like no one's ever entrusted him. Yeah. No one's ever entrusted him to be the leading man in like a major thing.
Right. And he's not like cool. He's never like cool. He's always kind of like, he's like a leading man who would wear like jeans and like white New Balance shoes. He's never going to like look sweet. You know what I mean? We're like, oh, yeah. No way. Like, let's go see the latest Greg Kinnear movie.
This is probably above your pay grade, but he is the Klay Thompson of white male actors from the mid 90s.
I would, you know what? I would rewatch all of John Wick if it wasn't Keanu Reeves, if it was Greg Kinnear. I just want to know.
Honestly, I would watch that in an instant.
The whole time you're
like, I like Greg Kinnear in everything that he's in, but like also in the 15 years where he's been missing, I didn't notice it. Like it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, he was around.
Yeah,
he was Yeah, he's in a movie where he's a Siamese twin with Matt Damon. Like, Greg Kinnear. Everybody loves him.
Man, he hasn't been. He was in movie 43. He was in that pile of shit.
Ooh, I watched that a couple years ago. That is, it's not even good sketch comedy. Like, it's just like, let's say outrageous things.
Great.
Let's put balls on someone's forehead. It's like, this isn't, that's a low point of American pop culture.
He was in BoJack Horseman pretty much as himself. Greg Kinnear.
I didn't make it all the way through BoJack Horseman, but from what I saw, I don't remember him. But that's kind of Greg Kinnear's career.
Yep. Sorry, bro. So, I mean, the way I reacted to Greg Kinnear. Well, let's see. No, when I reacted to Greg Kinnear in this movie, I was kind of, like you said, just sort of reminded that Greg Kinnear is a person who exists on Earth. But every time somebody else kind of was introduced on camera, I was like surprised and psyched. Tom Waits right at the beginning, and he knows Tom Waits. Eddie Izzard, who really like is not in that many movies, and by the way, is like completely underutilized in this movie.
Yeah, but he's really, really good at what he brings to that role.
Right.
Like he's not being Eddie Izzard as a guy who likes disco.
No.
Like he created a character out of whole cloth for like 3 scenes. And I appreciate that about him.
I guess I felt like he was trying to sort of like channel like Six-Fingered Man energy, like the Princess Bride, and kind of played it a little bit straighter than it was necessary. I mean, then again, I think the writing was an issue because of the way they wrap up his character is sort of like Eddie. Like they could have done so much more with Eddie Izzard. IMHO.
Yeah, I think he walked into.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, finish your thought. That's fine.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, it's not like I came up with the Taco Bell Chihuahua campaign and filmed that, so I don't know if I'm one to speak. You don't know
what you're talking about,
but I would say you could have used Eddie Izzard a lot better, and you used Greg Kinnear perfectly. Yeah,
I think what happened was Eddie Izzard walked into the first like reading of the script and saw what Jeffrey Rush was going to do, and was like, "Oh well, he's crazy, so I'm gonna have to up my game." Speaking of upping your game, Ben Stiller is trying really hard in this movie.
He is trying really hard.
And when Ben Stiller tries really hard in a movie, usually it's not great.
Right.
When he just kind of slides into a role, kind of slouches into a role, and just like is that character, I think those are the movies of Ben Stiller that work the best for me. There are a few exceptions. I don't think you can say he slides into a natural role in Tropic Thunder, but that movie's amazing.
That movie's great. Yeah.
That movie's so good. But,
also fantastic.
I don't think that's necessarily because Ben Stiller's character is so great. I think everything around him is working perfectly like a Swiss fucking watch to build that comedy. But for the most part, I just felt like Ben Stiller was doing an 11 when he really needed to pull like an 8.
I think that's fair. You know what I think happened too a bit? It seems like a lot of the cast had a lot of control over their characters and their lines and stuff. I think there probably could have been much better management over the script and probably better editing, and that would have made for a better movie. But the times where I thought Ben Stiller and Janine Garofalo were playing off of each other were pretty fun. I thought they were kind of goofballs, and they were
Janine Garofalo every 25 minutes just being horrified by something in the group was pretty fantastic.
She was. I like Janine Garofalo a lot. I thought she was great in Wet Hot American Summer. So it was kind of cool to see her doing like a trial run for that with some of these scenes. William H. Macy playing pretty much William H. Macy.
Boy, that man, if he's not scamming away for his kids to get into college, he is the most boring man in the world.
Yeah.
And it kind of works. Him being such a stiff, rigid. He's Ron Swanson without any of the charisma.
Right. Or the personal politics. He's just sort of like committed to being. I mean, I think they kind of make a joke about it with all the mayo.
Yeah.
because he's like white.
He's bland.
Did you hear the joke? So when Kel is running through all of the different heroes, he's talking about networking. That
Yeah.
which is it's a great cynical line. Is the reason why they're like they can't assemble a good crew is because they're not good at networking.
Yeah.
And he mentions a bunch of different superheroes, and he mentions White Flight and the Black Menace, and they work as a pair.
Yeah, I mean, there are some parts of this script which are pretty funny, and pretty well written, but overall, it's a little bland. But you pointed out something that I immediately took in with the film was just like the cynicism of like the mid 90s
Yeah.
creeping into
Gen
this
X.
late 90s thing. Yeah. It's super Gen X, and fuck all Gen X people. They're all just do nothing pieces of shit in my experience.
Except for Keanu. Keanu's fine.
Yeah, Keanu works hard.
But like Greg Kinnear, fuck that dude.
Yeah, the cynicism of just like Ben Stiller's character just kind of being a piece of shit to people.
No.
Like it's just kind of gross. And in Captain Awesome, Captain Amazing is so cynical. Everything is about the advertising and the marketing department, and it feels gross. Like even when you're in that first opening scene where one of the main robber of the old folks home is Artie Lang, stand-up comedian Artie Lang. I don't know what the fuck he's doing in here, but he is obviously somebody's friend. Like Ben Stiller got a bunch of his comedian friends to be in this movie.
Well, that's what Janine Garofalo. I read an article where she talks about being in this movie, and she was like, "The pay is really good," so I like convinced Ben Stiller to do it. For some reason, they just had like a bunch of money to just be like, let's just get a bunch of people that we know.
And it really works out. But yeah, no, just the whole, it just feels, you would never see that kind of cynicism even in a Marvel villain in a movie of this genre. You don't even find that kind of cynicism in the DC universe because that universe is more apathetic to humans.
Right.
Whereas this is just like gross, late stage capitalism, criticism, just like how superheroes would probably be in real life, which is kind of depressing, which is just advertising vehicles. And then, yeah, like the whole, like you have to market yourself and strategize with other superheroes to get your name out there. It's not about like the quality of the work that you do or the heroics that you've accomplished. It's just pure 90s cynicism. And
I think that's where, I mean, I'm better understanding the way that superhero movies really developed over in our century or in our current century rather, since we've kicked it in both. But like Batman Begins really is a reset to the entire genre of superhero films. And then arguably like Marvel is its own second reset. Like I feel like those were two different like interpretations of where the superhero genre should go after that whole like 90s era.
Yes, that's true. And I think
Batman Begins was like, let's get edgy. And Marvel was like, let's get fantastic.
I think Batman Begins was that whole series of movies, specifically the first two, are the like crystallization of something that kind of started with the X-Men movies, actually, where like they wanted to ditch what had come before, like the Superman movies and the campy Batman movies. And they wanted to get more serious in the X-Men, so they didn't dress them up in the comic book attire. And they took the characters more serious. I mean, the first time we see Wolverine in those movies, he's like getting drunk in a bar and, slices a shotgun in half,
that was new then. Yeah, that was
dope
really
as fuck.
Yeah, that was really different at that point. I remember that.
And,
you're right.
And there was still some kind of camp like references. Nothing was camp in them, but they would be like, hey, you're a Cyclops, or, what am I supposed to be wearing? Yellow spandex? Like, they would reference it kind of like,
you're right.
Yeah, we're not giving you what you want,
Yeah.
but, this feels more realistic to the, 90s and 2000s. Whereas Batman, it was just like, this is what would happen in real life, which you can afford with Batman because no one has superpowers.
Right. I'm glad you brought up X-Men because I forgot about it just because the last like 3 movies have been horrible, so I've been trying not to remember.
Boy, trash.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I forgot about X-Men, but that was a good one to bring up. And I mean, for some context too, like this came out the same year as The Phantom Menace. It probably came out the same summer even. They probably were released within a few months of each other. August. Yeah. They would have been released within 2 or 3 months of each other. So, I mean, this was a pretty critical moment where, the film industry was going to change. CGI was going to become way more important. Fan service was going to look a lot different. So, like, Mystery Men kind of jumped in at a really weird point. It was kind of left out of the narrative just because it just came in at a really strange transitional moment.
Yeah. I do think that there's a lot to like about both this universe and these characters.
Yeah.
But part of me wouldn't mind if they redid this because I feel like, especially with this cast, I just wish the script had been a little bit more inventive, a little bit more fun, and a little bit more of the budget put into some, fun set pieces.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're a couple years away from when a lot of these people were just given a lot more creative freedom to be weirdos, and we know how effective, Ben Stiller, Janine Garofalo, honestly, even Paul Rubens have been in situations where they can just kind of do their thing.
And William H. Macy's a great actor.
He's
I
a
feel
great
like
actor, yeah.
He's we make fun, but he's decently used in this film, and he's kind of the heart of the original 3 team that we meet at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
And that carries through in the egg salad
right.
scene. But yeah, I feel like a lot of the time he's not used to his fullest capabilities.
That I would say that's honestly just an overarching criticism for me of the movie. I think a lot of people weren't, not just the actors themselves, but also the characters weren't developed in a way that really maximized how interesting they were. I think that there was a lot of wasted potential, and it was just sort of, I think probably a younger director didn't know how to use them effectively. I think there were a lot of different personalities involved that were manipulating the script as well, which I think probably made it difficult to manage. There probably needed to be a better editor. So like, there's a lot of things that could have been managed a little bit better to make this more interesting, more compelling. Do you know what I would have liked? Just imagine if like Owen Wilson had just like been, you know what? I'm just thinking about the entire cast of Armageddon, but just in this movie instead. And Ben Stiller.
Let's recast right now.
Okay.
You got to put
Liv Tyler as Jean Garofalo.
Obviously, because I think she's the only woman in that movie. So, I would put
Ben Affleck as Greg Kinnear. No, Steve Buscemi as Greg Kinnear.
But then he's Batman in the modern sense, so that would kind of be funny.
Yeah,
I think Ben could play that role really well.
Well, I'm just thinking who would be the funniest death. Spoiler, because Steve Buscemi would be hilarious in that situation. But yeah, okay, now
Steve Buscemi is the farting guy.
Yeah, Steve Buscemi is Paul Rubens. He's a wild card.
Who's the like NASA director in that fucking movie? I forget his name.
Oh yeah,
Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah.
Billy Bob Thornton Sphinx? As William H. Macy.
Yes, okay,
would be perfect.
Yeah, all right.
There would be a little bit more character to him, but him doing that egg salad sandwich scene would be so fucking funny.
Yeah. Owen Wilson as the invisible one.
Oh, Man,
Wow, he's gonna
I can
blow
totally
up the
turn invisible,
city?
guys. Like, this is crazy.
That's terrible.
Why would he do something like that?
Wow.
Wow. Wow, he's really gonna blow up the city, guys. Wow.
And then I still want Ben Stiller. Ben Stiller should have been in Armageddon.
Ben Stiller played the rocket ship in Armageddon. Not a lot of people know that. He was the CGI stand-in. People would just climb on his back and they're like, pretend you're in outer space.
Blue Steel.
Here comes the asteroid.
And what's his name? Michael Clark Duncan, who is also,
well, he's the only minority. So
we can't whitewash my Mystery Men. We can't whitewash it. Just put Owen Wilson in there. He's like the whitest person you could possibly choose.
Wow, and that's really offensive.
He's whiter than Greg Kinnear.
Wow. Like, what did I even do, man?
Wow.
Wow, that's
I don't want you
wild.
to edit any of this. I want you to just keep just doing Owen Wilson wows for a while.
Wow.
Wow, Jeffrey Rush is in this movie.
That's what he says when Jeffrey Rush walks into a scene. He just is like, wow, Jeffrey Rush is in this. Just completely breaks the fourth wall. Oh my god. Oh, that'd be so fucking funny. Oh, that's the hardest I've laughed in a long time. I just imagine him as Jeffrey Rush like walks onto the balcony to like confront them as after they break in. And just like, wow. Jeffrey Rush is in this movie. What the fuck am I doing in this movie? Oh, I'm crying.
And then Bruce Willis is the Sphinx. He's the like mentor guy.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Yeah, and then Steve Buscemi is like, yeah, we already got Steve Buscemi. All right, well, I think we got the entire cast of Armageddon there.
All right, Mike. Now that we've kind of discussed our thoughts on the film, I just want to talk about some random little bits that I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
First of all, the Disco Boys were all great throughout the entire film, but they are playing jams in their fucking limo, and we get like 2-second snippets of those great songs. So they licensed that music, but then criminally only used it for like a couple of seconds. But we get a couple extended plays. But man, every single song they're listening to is a jam.
Yeah, like Walter Murphy's The Fifth of Beethoven is in there and stuff. Remember too that this movie, in addition to all these other things, is like the major breakout debut of the song All Star by Smash Mouth.
Yeah.
This is before we knew what would happen with that song. It's like hearing the origins of, like, I'm trying to remember a time there, there are things in the world where you try and remember what things were like before then and you just can't. And we're talking like pandemic, cell phones, Smash Mouth, Who Let the Dogs Out. I can't remember a time before these songs, but there was. This was it.
I mean, the instant that song comes on, I mean, this movie feels very much of a period, and that period is the year 1999. This film, there was no room for this type of cynicism in American culture after September 11th.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. There wasn't.
And that killed, I mean, you get grunge in the early, late 80s, early 90s.
Right.
And that kind of peaks by the mid 90s. And the artistic aspects of that sort of disaffected cynicism just became cynicism. And then that stuck through, and that's why the late 90s feels so of a specific period.
Yeah.
Because the end of it is a day and a time. Like,
you're absolutely right.
It was just over.
Yeah.
There just was not a place for that in the culture anymore. Whether right or wrong, I think, probably could use some cynicism in the mid 2000s. But as soon as Smash Mouth, the needle drops, you're like, oh, this is exactly 1999. This is the most 1999 that 1999 is ever 1999.
Smash Mouth. Yeah. It was like Frosted Tips.
Hot. I also really loved, and this felt very advertisement, the Jeffrey Rush finger cam.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow. That's what I said while watching this film. I was like, wow, that's a camera on his finger. How'd they get it that small? Wow. All of this is cut.
No. Owen Wilson and Mystery Man?
I'm kidding.
It's gold.
Yeah, it is. I mean, honestly. But no, I thought that was I thought that was a cute little bit of creative filmmaking in a film that otherwise felt like it was shot entirely on sets on a backlot somewhere that felt wholly bland.
I agree.
Cinematically.
Yeah.
And that was a cute little thing that only helped to accentuate the just off the walls, balls crazy performance by Jeffrey Rush.
He was a fun villain too. He was effective as a villain. I thought, like, as far as they made an attempt to make some of the heroic characters a little bit more rounded from a narrative standpoint, but I think Jeffrey Rush, in part just of the way that he handled the character and delivered lines, I thought that he had some depth and was well rounded. He was a fun villain, and I like that his main weapon was a really long fingernail.
Yeah,
like
that was
a coke
very
nail. Yeah.
I also really like that Jeffrey Rush didn't want to kill Greg Kinnear, or at least he wanted to be the one to do it. So when he walks in and finds a dead Captain Amazing, he's both furious and upset. Like, that's what paying a really good actor to be a comic book villain does for you, is he provides an emotional and complex, characterization of his character just with one singular look. And I really, again, it's those little pieces that just barely, that make this movie very watchable, but it just makes you wish it was just like 15% better.
I agree. Yeah. And I mean, it's the reason why a movie like this could effectively be remade without any of us kind of rolling our eyes. Like, there's things that can be done with this movie, but like, there's places to build, not necessarily to redo, but there's places to build.
All right, Mike, with that, I think let's take a little break here and we'll come back and talk about something else.
Sure.
Here's what's coming up in the next few weeks on Subject Blackout. Next week, you can join Mike and I in watching Rush Hour. All 3 Rush Hour films recently dropped on HBO Max, so that gave Mike and I a great reason to revisit some of our favorite kung fu comedies from the late 90s and early 2000s. Mike and I will be watching Rush Hour 1 this week, and next week we'll be watching Rush Hour 2. And as we have previously stated, we're very excited about what we're calling the Furiously Fast Film Fest. Over the 5 weeks in June, Mike and I will be catching up on the Fast and Furious saga as we anticipate the drop of Fast 9. Now, neither Mike or I have seen all of these films, and in fact, we've basically only seen parts of a few of them. But we're looking forward to an exciting and hopefully fun viewing experience as we go through these films together for the first time. So join us for watching Rush Hour 1 and 2 in the next couple weeks, and in June, join us for the Furiously Fast Film Fest. As always, if you want to reach us, the easiest way is to visit subjecttoblackout.com. There you can find all of our social links, all of our podcasts, and you can always feel free to reach out to us at timo@subjecttoblackout.com. All right, Mike, is there anything else that you've been consuming this week?
I watched the OC. Been watching the OC.
As someone who's never watched the OC, but is tentatively interested in watching the OC, pitch it to me.
It's like a mid-2000s teen drama where a bunch of people feel ways about stuff with a killer soundtrack. Yeah. There's a lot of like just kind of shifty eyes, you know, either kind of like in a suspicious way or in just kind of like you know, like
we need something to go on top of this Imogen Heap song.
Kind of like a thirsty way. Yeah. And then most of the drama is driven by people just sort of like not communicating for like 5 seconds. Like it's like the entire show is people walking in on each other and sort of like, oh, I have to go. Like if you had just stayed and just gotten a completely reasonable explanation for what you're looking at, like you'd be fine.
Excuse me, is
oh,
this
my
happening?
God, I have to,
oh, in
I have
fact,
to
no. I'm sorry that it looked that way, but actually, this is happening. Oh, well, that's fine.
Yeah.
Conflict resolved. And then there's 18 minutes of silence, followed by wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I in preparation for the second season of Mythic Quest on Apple Plus, I rewatched that series kind of as background television over the past couple days.
Wow.
And it's from a couple of the creators of It's Always Sunny, but it's about a video game studio.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for the most part a fairly conventional sitcom, but it's got a little bit of, I mean, the characters aren't the worst people in the world, like It's Always Sunny, but they're not the best. They're often very selfish and narcissistic, and so that is kind of where some of the comedy comes from, a la It's Always Sunny.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I really enjoy it, but it is probably it's probably not for everyone if you like a more complicated, more nuanced television series. But if you're looking for something that's just like a half-hour comedy that, you know, fills the void of your Good Place or Parks and Rec or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a show that's well worth, you know, spending a couple 3-4 hours with.
I feel like I've like maxed out on my streaming services. I feel like I'm paying for Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus, and I'm like hanging out on HBO Max.
Yeah, you use my Max.
Yeah.
Don't tell HBO. Yeah, I have too many. I have Peacock, but that's because I am a English soccer fan, so I have to have Peacock. Peacock is terrible. Yes, fart noise is accurate. The streaming service barely works for the soccer, and it like streams in 720. And I have a 65-inch OLED 4K TV, so it streaming at 720 actually looks worse on my TV than it looks on other TVs. So fuck NBC and Peacock. NBC has never gotten an app correct for streaming their soccer. It makes me so furious. So fuck them to death. As soon as the season is over in a couple weeks, I'm canceling it, only to pick it up in the fall when the fucking soccer season restarts. But I don't do Hulu. I will subscribe to Hulu for a couple weeks if there's something on that I want to watch. But what do you use Hulu for?
I mean, I have it because I have Spotify.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I had that deal for a while.
Yeah, so I don't know. I just show up there anytime I want to watch like an old TV show, but I don't think I've watched anything original on Hulu.
Yeah, so it's not original to Hulu, but like they have some exclusive streaming rights. So
Yeah.
like anything that's on FX, which does pretty good television for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So your Fargos, your Legions. Did you ever watch Legion?
No, I didn't watch any of those.
Legion was pretty good.
Yeah.
There's that little Dicky on there.
Hmm.
I think is the name of it. That's actually pretty funny. Yeah. But for the most part, I got rid of that Spotify Hulu deal for some reason a while back. So I no longer use it. But yeah, Netflix, I feel like, especially with their sticking to the streaming model of one big dump, so that everyone can binge.
I'm totally down to binge on their dump.
Yeah. Wow. I don't actually like that format of television. I think shows like Stranger Things would be improved by stretching it out a little bit. So we'll see if they adopt that in the future at all. But man, I am struggling to find things on Netflix and reasons to keep it other than like my sister is on my account and she uses it. That's pretty much the only reason I don't cancel it.
If you want to dump your account, you can jump onto mine.
Well, again, my sister's on mine.
I mean, she can get her
so
own.
are my parents.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
But yeah, I would say HBO Max is probably one of my favorites. I have dedicated myself to at some point in the future to watching the Kurosawa films, which they have several of on HBO Max. Those films are, supposedly the inspiration for Star Wars and the Magnificent Seven. And so I would like to see those at some point and expand my film knowledge a little bit. But, HBO is filled with good programming, and there's been some interesting original content on HBO Max since they came out. So that's probably my go-to service these days. But then Amazon Prime has kind of been doing the Disney thing where they string you along with, one series leading into the next, whether it's The Boys or it's Invincible, which I recently watched, or it was The Expanse, which is a great show, which I'd highly recommend anyone who likes good television. They all are making me cutting the cable cord seem like it wasn't that big of a deal, because we're getting up to the $100 and some odd that I was paying for cable beforehand. All right, Mike, I want to thank you for joining me once again. Next week, actually over the next couple weeks, as we said in the middle of the show, we are going to be rejoining Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker in the Rush Hour series. We are going to, over the next 2 weeks, going to watch Rush Hour and Rush Hour 2. Mike, are you excited for those films?
I am. I'm trying to draw on a line from those movies to express my enthusiasm, but all I've got is, can you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
You should have just said, wow.
Wow.
These two films are personal favorites of mine, if I'm honest. I recently watched, I believe, the first hour and a half or so of the second one, and holds up. Still very funny. Chris Tucker is excellent, and the action scenes are impeccable, as are all Jackie Chan action scenes. So I look forward to discussing that with you next week. Well, if you want to join us next week, go out there and find Rush Hour. They actually just dropped all 3 of the Rush Hour movies onto HBO Max, so you can watch them there if you're a subscriber. Otherwise, you can find us on all of the socials, except for Facebook. You can also visit subjecttoblackout.com. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to get in touch with us. You can also visit us on YouTube and comment there. Mike, I want to thank you for coming out again.
Thanks, Tim. Wow.